Hi, I'm Rowena. My son collapsed at home with a 104-degree fever, barely conscious. While I held him in my arms, begging for help, my parents were at a party, laughing, drinking, telling their friends he was faking it. They didn't come. Not to the hospital, not after. But the party, the speeches, the photos without us, they made sure those happened. And that night, I realized maybe this wasn't the first time they left me behind, just the first time I saw it for what it really was. So, what do you do when your own family starts planning a life that no longer includes you or your child? Friday evening hung thick with southern heat, the kind that makes you feel like the air itself is watching. Our house was quiet, just the hum of the ceiling fan, and Micah's small coughs coming from the living room. He was curled up in his dinosaur pajamas, a damp towel resting on his forehead, his cheeks pinker than usual. I was pacing, phone in hand, trying not to panic. He'd been warm earlier, but now, I could feel the fever spiking through his skin. Still, I told myself it was probably just a passing virus. Kids get sick, it happens. But something in his eyes didn't sit right. They fluttered, unfocused, like he was there and not there all at once. I pressed the back of my hand to his neck again, still burning. I glanced at the time, 7:43 p.m. Across town, they were all at the Legacy Night Party, Zinnia's big event. My parents, siblings, the whole polished crowd, champagne, cameras, speeches. And me? I wasn't invited. Again. Just like when they threw Dad's retirement party, without checking if I had to work that weekend. Or the year they announced Zinnia's pregnancy with a custom cake, forgetting to tell me altogether. This wasn't new. I dialed Mom anyway. Maybe she'd understand once she heard my voice. The call rang twice, then connected, and that's when I realized it had gone to speaker. Laughter poured through the phone, a clink of glasses, someone shouting, "To family!" before dissolving into cheers. Then, clearly, my mother's voice, amused and airy. "She's always exaggerating. He's probably faking it again, wants attention." My mouth went dry. I hadn't even said hello. Another woman chimed in. "Let him sweat it out. You deserve a night off." They all laughed. I stood in the middle of my living room, holding a burning child in my arms, and listened to them laugh. I didn't say a word. I hung up, not because I was calm, but because I was finished. Micah whimpered softly. I scooped him up, towel falling to the floor, and carried him to the car. No shoes, no bag. Just my child and a rising fear I didn't have time to process. At the ER, I gave his name to the nurse, his birthday, my insurance. They took him straight back. No one asked why I was alone. Outside, I leaned against the cool metal of the emergency entrance sign. Phone still in hand. Still warm from the call. I stared at it. The last thing I heard before I hung up was my mother laughing. The sun barely made it through the clouds that morning, casting a dull gray over the front lawn. I stood in the kitchen, stirring Micah's oatmeal, while he sat curled on the couch under a blanket, eyes half open, cheeks still pink from the fever. He was better, stable, but I wasn't. My phone buzzed. Then again. And again. I didn't even need to unlock it. I knew what it was. The family party from last night. Zinnia's big legacy night. The one they planned down to the champagne flutes and monogrammed napkins. The one I wasn't invited to. Curiosity got the better of me. I wiped my hands and picked up the phone. The notifications led me straight into a highlight reel of curated perfection. Verlene in a navy blue dress, my father toasting with the mayor, Zinnia in white sequins, arms linked with her husband, all teeth and charm. The caption read, "Family is everything. Everything, except me and Micah." I kept scrolling. Someone had posted a group shot from last summer's barbecue, one I remembered clearly because I was in it, holding Micah while he clung to my hip. Except now, I wasn't. My section of the photo had been cropped clean. Micah's face had been edited, blurred, replaced with another child's, maybe one of Zinnia's twins. Whoever did it took their time. It wasn't a sloppy cut-and-paste job. It was surgical. My hands tightened around the phone, not out of shock, but confirmation. It wasn't that they forgot me. They deliberately deleted me. I closed the album and exhaled, slowly. There's a special kind of pain when you realize you were never meant to be included in the first place. This wasn't about a missed invitation. It was a revision of memory, a rewriting of our place in their story. An email popped in next. Anonymous. No subject. Just a screenshot of a group text. Zinnia's name stood out immediately. "She's doing that sick kid thing again," she wrote. "It's classic Rowena. Anything to shift the spotlight." Beneath it, a response with a laughing emoji. I sat down at the edge of the sofa, not wanting to wake Micah. My jaw clenched. This wasn't just ignoring me. They were marketing me as a problem. I wasn't their daughter, their sister, the mother of their grandchild. I was an obstacle, an image risk. I should have been enraged. I should have fired off a message, exposed them online, posted a side-by-side of the edited photo and the original. But I didn't. I could hear my grandmother's voice echo in my mind, a phrase she used when church drama got thick. "Don't wrestle with pigs, baby. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it." So I stayed silent. But I wasn't still. No. Inside me, something rooted in place. There was a time, God help me, when I would have begged for their approval. When I'd try to explain myself, to prove I wasn't trying to take attention, to ask them why they always chose the shiny over the steady. That time was dead. Later that afternoon, while Micah napped, I pulled out a dusty photo from the hallway bookshelf. It was framed in cherry wood, polished, and centered under a little embroidered sign that read, "Our Blessed Family." The picture was from Micah's first birthday. My parents, me, him, all smiles. That smile had cost me hours of pretending everything was fine. I stared at it for a long while. Then I took it down. No anger, no drama, just done. The smile in that photo was real, but the love behind it never was. The rain had been falling steady since dawn, the kind that blurs the windows and silences the world. I moved through the house like I had the day before, laundry in one hand, a half-washed coffee mug in the other, the same podcast looping but unheard in the background. Micah was curled on the couch again, asleep this time, a blanket over his knees and cartoons flickering soundlessly across the screen. I used to call it mom mode, functioning through fog. Fold the towels, check his forehead, refill the humidifier, smile when he stirs. Cry later, maybe, if there's time. But not today. Today, the numbness was too structured to be sadness. It was a routine I'd been trained into. Act like nothing is broken, while the ground beneath you shifts. I was putting away a stack of old-school folders in the hallway closet when I knocked one loose. It tumbled open across the floor, and a small manila envelope slid out. I picked it up absent-mindedly, thinking it was from one of Micah's art classes. He loved to draw monsters with 6 legs and uneven smiles, but inside was no drawing. It was a discharge summary. From an emergency room, dated 4 months ago. My name wasn't listed as the guardian. Verlene was. The words were clinical. Patient presented with high fever, 103.4 degrees. Dehydration. Treated and discharged. My hand tightened around the paper. I remembered that weekend. I had flown to Tampa for a conference. My parents had offered to keep Micah overnight. "We'll have popcorn and Disney movies," they'd said. When I got home, he seemed a little tired, but they told me he just had a small cold. They never mentioned this. They never said he was sick, that he'd been taken to the hospital, that he'd been poked with needles, crying for someone who wasn't there. They looked me in the eye and said nothing. I sat down on the floor with the paper still in my hand. "I left him with them for 2 days," I whispered, voice brittle. "And they sent him back like nothing had happened." I closed my eyes, just for a second. The betrayal didn't scream. It settled in like mold, quiet and suffocating. I wanted to pretend it was an oversight, some forgetful moment in a busy weekend, but I knew better. This family didn't forget things. They omitted. Strategically. Systematically. And then came the memory of just 3 days ago, me standing in the ER, phone in hand, my father's voice on speaker saying, "He's fine. You need to stop overreacting. You're making him anxious." At the time, I had gritted my teeth and stayed silent. He was a retired physician. His tone had always been unshakable. When I was 7 and fell off the bike, he said I needed to toughen up. When I got pneumonia at 14, he called it a stubborn cough. And now, with Micah burning up in my arms, I was told to calm down. Not protect. Not trust your instincts. Calm down. I set the discharge summary on the table and stared at the wall where his medical diploma still hung. He'd given it to me the year Micah was born. "For legacy," he'd said. A reminder of where I came from. I remembered thanking him, framing it, hanging it as if it were a family crest. But now all I saw was an emblem of dismissal. My therapist once told me, "Gaslighting works best in silence. Keep a record, document the details, because they'll rewrite history if you let them." So I pulled out a fresh journal. I flipped past the empty pages and began writing. Date, symptom, comment made, who said it, how I responded, what I didn't say. I was done begging to be heard. I would collect my own truth, piece by piece, even if no one else acknowledged it. The rain hadn't let up, and the house still smelled like lavender from Micah's diffuser. I walked down the hall, stood in front of the framed diploma, and took a deep breath. Then I lifted it off the nail. If he wouldn't believe me, then he didn't deserve to hang on my wall. By Monday afternoon, the rain had cleared, but the air still felt heavy, like something unspoken lingered in it. Micah was asleep again, curled on the couch with a fleece blanket tucked under his chin. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check emails. Instead, I pulled out a storage bin from the hallway closet, the one where I'd stashed old tax forms, printouts, and things I once thought I'd never need. The quiet in the house was no longer haunting. It was precise, like the silence before a verdict. I sat at the dining table, paper piles around me, sorting through years of forgotten paperwork, hunting for patterns that had always been there, but I'd refused to connect. Birth records, immunization slips, a few ER bills. I started a spreadsheet on my laptop, marking dates, locations, symptoms. Grief, I was learning, begins to dissolve the moment you start building a case. My cursor hovered over a folder I hadn't opened in months, photos and videos, then family events. I double-clicked. The video from 2 nights ago was still there, downloaded and renamed. Legacy Night, Verleen FB Live. I hit play. There they were, live streaming from that glowing hotel ballroom. Zinnia in sequins, Dad laughing beside the pianist, Verleen beaming under gold lights. The background was smooth jazz. The laughter was too loud. I checked the timestamp, 4:17 p.m. My hands trembled, not with rage, but with focus, as I opened the ER intake form on my phone. Micah. Admitted 4:17 p.m. Symptoms: severe fever, dehydration, at risk of seizure. He was burning up in my arms, his tiny body limp, while my parents were raising glasses, nodding along to "What a Wonderful World." I paused the video mid-toast, my father's mouth wide open, mid-sentence. Then I clicked forward. At 4:19, he leaned into the camera and said, "Rowena? She always makes a scene." I pressed the spacebar to pause and just stared at the screen. No blinking, no reaction. Just a slow download bar as I saved the file under a new name. Exhibit A. By early evening, I was on a legal advice forum, anonymous, of course. I didn't want gossip, I wanted facts. I typed slowly. Seeking advice on emergency custody motion in South Carolina. Medical neglect by family members. Have supporting evidence. I copied terms as they appeared in responses. Family court affidavit, emergency petition, temporary guardianship injunction. No anger, just structure. It reminded me of a line Maya Angelou once said in an interview I'd bookmarked years ago. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. But I hadn't. I'd begged for new versions of them. Versions that didn't laugh when I cried. That didn't shrug when Micah needed a doctor. That didn't pretend the bleeding was a paper cut. At 6:42 p.m., a notification popped up. Verlene's Instagram story. Curiosity, not concern, made me click. It was a picture of the family. Zinnia, her kids, my parents, posed on the ballroom staircase. All beaming. The caption read, "Family is where peace lives." The irony tasted bitter. Peace. They weren't hiding their narrative anymore. They were packaging it, monetizing it, making legacy into a brand. I took a screenshot. Not because I needed more proof, but because someday Micah might. At bedtime, I walked past the bookshelf and pulled out the tablet. I played the video one more time. The audio turned low. Dad's voice echoed again. "She always makes a scene." I turned to Micah, still sleeping. I brushed a hand over his forehead. He didn't stir. Then I opened my phone and clicked back to the hospital form. Time admitted, 4:17 p.m. I didn't scream. I screenshot. The box was sitting on my front porch when I returned from dropping Micah off at school. Pale pink ribbon, no return address, just my name in loopy handwriting I didn't recognize until I opened it. Inside was a tiny get-well-soon kit. Lavender lotion, chamomile tea, a stuffed bear too pristine to have ever comforted a real child. Nestled on top was a folded note on thick cardstock. The handwriting was familiar now. "Don't blame Mom and Dad, okay? They were just trying to keep the mood light." No signature, but I didn't need one. I held the note in one hand and walked straight to the drawer where I kept old files, school forms, Micah's health records, the paper trail of solo parenting. I pulled out a medical proxy form from last year, one I never signed, but somehow had my name typed on it, listing Zinnia as the emergency contact. Same handwriting. The irony nearly made me laugh. They lied to my face, edited me out of photos, and undermined my choices. But hey, here's some tea and a teddy bear. Like lavender oil could erase intent. I dropped the note on the kitchen table, sat down, and opened my laptop. I had saved screenshots from Zinnia's event website, Legacy Night, because I knew someday I'd need more than memory. There it was, under the glowing "Our Family, Our Future" banner. Names of every sibling, cousin, in-law, their spouses, their kids. Micah and I weren't on the list. Under heir apparent was Zinnia's husband's name, printed bold in gold. The whole night hadn't just been about celebration. It was succession. They weren't just erasing me emotionally. They were replacing me administratively. I whispered aloud to myself, they weren't just having fun. They were drawing up a future, and I wasn't invited to exist in it. It's strange how clarity doesn't show up loud. It just lands, hard. I leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, and let the silence settle before reaching for my phone. I dialed without hesitating. "Hello?" my mother answered, cheerful, clueless. "I got the box," I said flatly. "Oh, good. I told Zinnia to—" "You don't get to erase me and still call me your daughter." A pause. "Rowena, don't be dramatic. Family doesn't sue family." "Then maybe you should have acted like family." Her breath hitched. I didn't wait for the response. I ended the call. Not a single piece of me flinched. I sat there a moment, phone still in my hand, not shaken, not boiling, just finished. That night, after Micah had brushed his teeth and crawled into bed with his dinosaur plushie and whispered, "Night, Mom," I opened the file on my computer I'd been too afraid to rename. Legal Templates Full Custody Draft.docs. I hovered over the title, fingers still. Then I clicked and typed slowly. Custody and rights, full retention. I didn't need anyone else's permission to claim what was mine. I had finally said it out loud, and the silence after felt like freedom. The sun broke through for the first time in days, filtering soft light across my kitchen floor. It felt like a lie. Nothing about the past 72 hours warranted sunshine. Micah was at school. His fever had finally broken. but not the tension, not the echo of everything left unsaid. I told myself I'd rest today, maybe read, maybe just sit. But the minute I opened the study drawer to grab a pen, I saw the envelope, tucked beneath an old utility bill. No stamp. My name written in slanted cursive. I didn't remember putting it there, didn't remember receiving it. I opened it anyway. Inside, 3 pages of typed forms, a draft of a temporary guardianship agreement. Zinnia listed as the guardian, my parents named as references. The date on the header? 2 weeks before the ER visit. My hands went still. They hadn't just been ignoring me. They had been preparing for my absence, manufacturing it. I sat down, slow and deliberate, reading every word, like it was a betrayal I'd already survived. Temporary custody may be pursued in cases of parental instability or medical incapacity. Instability. That word had been tossed around so often in family whispers, I should have seen it coming printed in black and white. I wasn't shocked. I was finished being shocked. That evening, I picked Micah up from school. He was holding a drawing of a spaceship and munching a granola bar when he looked up and asked, "Why didn't Grandma come to the hospital?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. She said she would visit if I got sick again. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not without breaking the last thread of control I had over the moment. Was she busy? I pulled into the driveway and parked, turning to face him. She made other choices. Micah nodded like that made perfect sense. But it shouldn't have. Not to an 8-year-old, when the only honest person in the room is your child. It's time to stop covering for grown adults who've made cruelty a tradition. That night, after he went to bed, I found myself dialing a number from an old contact list, Maya Watkins, an attorney who helped a friend of mine during her own custody mess years ago. Maya picked up on the third ring, her voice sharp but kind. "I think I need help," I said. She didn't ask for drama. She asked for documents. I emailed her the screenshots, the live stream, the handwritten note, the forged medical proxy, the guardianship draft. She called me back 30 minutes later. "You have more than a case," she said, her tone clean and cold. "You have a pattern. We file tomorrow." The phrase echoed in my chest. Not a maybe, not a someday, a tomorrow. I thanked her, closed my laptop, and sat in the dark for a few minutes, listening to the soft whir of Micah's white noise machine from down the hall. On the kitchen counter, my phone buzzed. A message in the family group chat from my mother. "Hope you're all feeling better. We missed you at the brunch." No mention of the paperwork. No mention of Micah's ER visit. Just curated concern. I opened the chat, hovered my thumb over the reply button, then didn't type a thing. Instead, I scrolled to the settings. Left the chat. Deleted it. No warning. No goodbye. I didn't just leave the thread. I left the role they wrote me into. By Thursday afternoon, the clouds had gathered again. I watched the storm push its way in from the bay window, the kind of dark gray that feels like a warning. My phone buzzed just once, the school's number lighting up the screen. "Mrs. Gaines," the counselor began gently. "Micah had a tough day in art. He cried during class. We asked him if anything happened at home, but he said no. Then he showed us what he drew. I didn't speak. I just listened as she described a picture of a long dinner table, carefully drawn, with everyone seated, except Micah. His chair sat off to the side. Empty. He said it's Thanksgiving," she continued, "but he didn't want to be in the picture." After I hung up, I stared at nothing for a while. Even children know when love is performative. He didn't just feel left out. He felt removed. Later that evening, I was sorting laundry when my phone buzzed again. Someone had tagged me in a post. It was an image of Zinnia and my ex-husband at a fundraiser, smiling wide beneath a banner that read, "Family Unity, Celebrating Roots." My mother stood beside them, hands clasped, beaming. The caption, "Honored to support strong, stable homes." I didn't even feel the sting. I felt calculation. 10 minutes later, a message from my attorney popped up on my screen. "Need to talk. Something came across my desk. We met over video within the hour. She looked tired but direct. Your ex filed a temporary parenting petition, she said. He's citing instability, family alienation, and a letter from your mother supporting his request. I sat there, hands in my lap, heartbeat calm. Prepare your statement, she said. And we're filing for full restriction. No contact unless court supervised. I nodded once. There was nothing left to grieve. They weren't just cutting me out. They were building a case, page by page. Before I logged off, I opened my browser and checked the comments under that family photo. Buried in the thread was an old post someone had revived, a screenshot from a college group chat. My name in bold, above a line that read, Rowena's the unstable one. She cries when people leave parties early. Shared publicly. Anonymous, but clearly leaked from within. They weren't just rewriting the present. They were rewriting the past. Digging through memory, searching for reasons to disqualify me. I forwarded it to my lawyer. They're not attacking me, I wrote. They're shaping a narrative I never asked to be in. She responded within minutes. Then we give them a story with an ending they didn't script. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened a blank document. I wrote the words, Family doesn't mean you get to rewrite my life into something convenient for your reputation. I saved the file, never posted it. It wasn't for them. It was for me. I no longer existed to keep their image clean. I existed to give my son the truth. The unfiltered, unedited, messy but honest truth. Just after 10, someone knocked at the door. A courier stood on the porch with an envelope. I signed without asking. Inside was a cease and desist from Zinnia's PR lawyer. They claimed I was defaming the family legacy. I sat on the edge of the couch, envelope in one hand, and whispered, I wasn't defaming, I was documenting. By Friday evening, the air was so thick with humidity, it felt like the walls might sweat. The storm from the night before had passed, but it left everything damp, heavy, like something had settled over the house and refused to leave. At 6 p.m. sharp, I clicked, Start Meeting. No camera, no introduction. Just a screen full of familiar faces. Zinnia adjusting her hair in the bottom right corner, Dad looking annoyed before muting himself, Mom sighing like she was already the victim. Tonight, I said, voice steady, I'm not asking questions. I'm presenting. Zinnia smirked. This another intervention, Rowena? I clicked to the first slide. Micah's ER admittance. Timestamp 4:17 p.m. Next slide. A live stream screenshot. Same time. My parents clinking glasses under a chandelier while my son was seizing on our bathroom floor. Third slide. The voicemail. I hit play. She's being dramatic. He's probably just faking it, Mom's voice said, clear and bright through the speaker. I watched their faces shift. Zinnia froze mid-eye roll. My father leaned forward, and for the first time in years, actually looked like he didn't know what to say. Slide 4. The guardianship paperwork. Signed and dated 2 weeks before Micah collapsed. Zinnia's name as guardian. My parents as references. No one spoke. Dad finally unmuted. Are you recording this? I looked straight at the screen, though no one could see me. I don't need to. I already filed. Zinnia's face hardened. She logged off. I clicked to the final slide. An email, forwarded from an old assistant of my mother's. Subject line, Legacy Night RSVP, confirmed donor attendance. The body of the email was simple. We cannot risk Rowena attending. The donor needs to see a united, stable family. I paused, then said quietly, You skipped the hospital to protect an image. Not Micah, not me. Just optics. Mom's voice cracked through the silence. You don't understand how hard we've worked for this family. No, I said. I do. That's why I'm not part of it anymore. And then I ended the call. No sign-off, no dramatic exit. Just done. Later that night, I printed the final copy of the petition. Emergency motion for sole custody, no visitation without court approval. I slid it into the envelope, sealed it, addressed it. I stood at the mailbox longer than I needed to. Streetlights buzzed overhead. The night was too quiet for what had just happened, but that envelope, thick with every document, every screenshot, every receipt, was weighty with truth. I dropped it in and turned away. The next time they speak my name, it'll be in a courtroom. Saturday began with a hush. No buzzes, no messages, no unread texts lighting up my screen. The kind of silence I once mistook for punishment now felt like permission. I sat on the porch, hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold, listening to the wind tap against the windows and the branches settle after last night's storm. I used to fear silence, thought it meant rejection. Now I understood. It was just the absence of noise, not the absence of truth. A ceasefire, not peace. I glanced at my inbox, more out of habit than hope. Spam, a coupon from the grocery store, a forwarded chain email from someone I hadn't spoken to since college. Then one subject line made me sit up. Statement regarding Legacy Night. It was a link to a blog post from a local independent outlet. Anonymous sources, public records, social media timestamps. It was all there. My family's Legacy Night had become a headline. At first, I assumed it was just another glossy recap. But then I read the quote. Medical neglect doesn't begin with sickness. It begins with silence. The source? Dr. Eldon. The same pediatrician my mother had blacklisted years ago for marrying outside the church. The same man who had quietly treated Micah when no one else in my family returned my calls. He'd given that quote, knowing what it would mean. Validation doesn't always shout. Sometimes it comes dressed in quiet solidarity. Scrolling down, I saw the PR response from my family, a predictable, sanitized release. The family regrets the misunderstanding and continues to prioritize unity. But it didn't hold. The blog had lined up timestamps, Micah's ER admission, the livestream footage, even the altered family photo. Truth didn't need to yell, it just needed alignment. The comment section under the article said it all. People weren't buying it. Words like erased, performative, and cold peppered the replies. Some asked why my son's name never appeared on any family legacy lists. Others simply said, "Good for her." I didn't feel triumph. There was no victory lap, just a tired exhale, a kind of justice that didn't feel sweet, only earned. Around noon, Micah wandered into the kitchen, hair tousled, voice groggy. "Are we still going to Grandma's for Christmas?" I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I didn't want to say it the way it used to be said to me. Sharp, rushed, dismissive. "No, baby. Not this year," I said, crouching to meet his eyes. "We're starting our own traditions." He nodded like it made perfect sense, then asked if we could bake cookies and stay in pajamas all day. I said yes. Later that evening, while he built a cardboard fort in the living room, I pulled the family scrapbook off the shelf. Pages of forced smiles, hollow captions, birthdays that never felt like mine. I flipped through, stopping only once, at a photo of Micah's first Christmas. His cheeks round, my smile tight, Verlene holding him like a borrowed accessory. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I closed the book, taped it shut, and carried it into the attic. As I slid it onto the highest shelf, I whispered to myself, not out of grief, but release. Letting go didn't feel like defeat. It felt like breathing again. Sunday started with sun, finally, but I didn't notice it. I was too busy watching my inbox refresh itself every few seconds, tracking shares, likes, and reposts from the article that had cracked open the shiny facade my family built like a fortress. Micah was across the street at the Ridley's house for a playdate. I sat alone in the kitchen, laptop open, no sound but the occasional ping, as the post about Legacy Night continued to ripple. I didn't comment, didn't retweet. I didn't need to. The truth didn't require my voice anymore. It had its own legs, its own volume. I just watched it walk. Halfway through my second cup of coffee, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. No number, just a message. I pressed play. "Rowena, a familiar voice whispered. It's Judith, from your mom's church. I don't know if I should be saying this, but I didn't know how bad it was. I thought you were just being difficult. I see now. I'm sorry. 7 seconds. That's all it took to shift something in my chest. The woman who once patted my head at potlucks and said, "You always were a little sensitive," now called to apologize. Quietly, but sincerely. I saved the message and forwarded it to my attorney. Not because it would win the case, because it proved I wasn't the only one waking up. After lunch, I drove to Micah's school to pick up a packet his teacher had prepped for the upcoming Family Week assignment. Inside, among math worksheets and coloring pages, was a drawing. A house. A tree. Me and Micah, holding hands in front. No grandparents. No extended family. His teacher handed it to me gently. He said he didn't know where to put the others. I stared at the drawing for a long time, tracing the stick figures with my thumb. I'd spent years trying to be heard. He just drew it. At home, I took the framed medical diploma off the hallway wall and replaced it with Micah's drawing. The paper curled slightly in the frame, but I didn't flatten it. I liked it imperfect. I remembered a quote I'd saved once. Michelle Obama said it during a campaign. When they go low, we go high. And sometimes we go legal. I opened my laptop and started typing. Final affidavit for the emergency custody motion. Every sentence stripped of emotion, just fact, just evidence. No more stories, just receipts. I attached the voicemail, the drawing, the press article, the timeline chart. I wrote a single sentence under the final paragraph. This is no longer a matter of opinion. It is a matter of protection. I printed the document, clipped it together, and placed it in the manila envelope beside the others I'd already sent. Before sundown, I drove it to Maya's office, slid it into the mail slot, and stood outside for a beat longer than necessary. The label on the front read, "Motion to suspend all visitation rights pending review." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching the sunlight stretch across the sidewalk, realizing that for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing acknowledgement. The court date wasn't just for them, it was for me too. The first thing I noticed that morning wasn't the sunlight or the smell of coffee. It was the absence of alarms, of urgency. My eyes opened because they were rested, not because something needed fixing. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't wake up building a defense in my head. Micah was still asleep, his blanket half draped over the side of the bed. The house wasn't loud or busy. It was just still, but not the kind of still that used to make my chest tighten. This was different. This stillness felt earned. I made a cup of coffee, walked barefoot to the back porch, and sat with both hands wrapped around the mug. The sky was pale blue, the breeze steady. I breathed in. Nothing came crashing in behind the breath. No court filings, no emails from Maya, no urgent texts disguised as family concern. Peace isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it sounds like your own breathing. The verdict had come 3 days ago. Full custody granted. Supervised visitation for Verleen. 1 hour every other month. Monitored. Public record sealed, but not erased. The transcripts existed. The history remained. Zinnia didn't even show up. My father sat beside my mother in silence, looking down at his shoes as the judge read through the decision. Verleen didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years, and said nothing. That silence, heavy as it was, felt more honest than any apology she could have mustered. Later that afternoon, while folding laundry, I pulled one of Micah's school sweaters from the pile. Something fluttered out of the pocket, folded, slightly wrinkled, but still legible. "Don't fight because of me." It was the same note, the one I'd found weeks ago and tucked away, too afraid to deal with it then. But now, reading it again with different eyes, it didn't sting, it reminded. Even children feel the emotional fallout of adult pride. I found a pen and wrote just below his words, "We're safe now." I slipped it into the side of his lunchbox, right next to the napkin and apple slices. After I packed away the last of the clean clothes, I walked to the guest closet. Boxes lined the top shelf, filled with photo albums, old cards, letters, and things I used to believe were anchors, proof that I came from something solid. But they weren't anchors. They were sandbags, holding down a version of myself I no longer wanted to carry. I kept only a few photos, the ones where my smile didn't look rehearsed. Everything else I sealed away in storage. I didn't throw it out. I didn't need to erase it. I just didn't want it close anymore. I didn't lose a family, I whispered to myself as I pushed the last box into the attic. I left a role that was never mine to begin with. That night, I applied for a part-time job at a community clinic downtown. Not because I needed the paycheck, but because I needed a new place to root. When Micah came home from school, he walked in, dropped his backpack, and handed me a piece of construction paper folded like a certificate. "Look," he said, grinning. "Best family drawing. New traditions." It was a drawing of the two of us in our backyard, sitting under the blanket fort we'd built last weekend. Just us. No grandparents, no aunts, no empty chairs to fill. I hung it on the fridge. That fort wasn't just his idea. It was our foundation now. 2 weeks had passed since the court ruling, and not a single message came from Verlene. Until today. The envelope arrived mid-morning, wedged between the utility bill and a grocery flyer. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Still elegant, still trying to impress someone. I sat on the porch as Micah pieced together his Lego castle on the steps. His brow furrowed, tongue poking out slightly, while he focused on getting the roof just right. He didn't look up when I opened the letter. It was 4 pages. Handwritten. Scripted loops that tried to pass as gentle. There were apologies, thin and late. Justifications, masked as explanations. We did what we thought was best. I never stopped loving you. I read every word, then folded it in half. I didn't need to cry. I didn't feel vindicated either, just done. It's amazing how many words people find once you're no longer listening. That afternoon, Micah and I drove to the church for a community event. Craft booths, lemonade stands, the usual forced cheer. Verlene was there, of course, standing behind a bake sale table like she hadn't tried to erase me from her narrative. She spotted us immediately and called my name. I didn't flinch. I walked over, Micah tugging gently at my hand. She asked if we could talk, and I agreed. We stepped behind the building, near the rose bushes she'd planted years ago as a legacy project. "You made us look like monsters," she said. I looked her straight in the face. "I didn't make you look like anything. I just stopped cleaning up after you." She took a step forward, like she wanted to hug me. I stepped back. She froze. "Forgiveness doesn't require proximity," I said quietly. "It requires truth." She didn't speak again. On the drive home, Micah hummed softly from the back seat. His voice broke into the silence. "Remember when I told the judge I wanted to stay with you?" "I remember," I said. "I meant it." That flashback hit quietly. The way he'd stood in that courtroom, small and steady, and told the judge, "I don't want to live with Grandma. I want to stay with my mom." That was the moment the room shifted. The moment Verlene's fantasy of redemption dissolved, not because of me, but because of the little boy she never learned to see clearly. Back at home, I found Maya waiting on my porch steps with a large envelope. "Judge signed it this morning," she said. "All visitations suspended. Permanently." The document inside confirmed it. A notarized statement from months ago. Verlene's own medical refusal form, signed during Micah's hidden illness. That single page spoke louder than any argument ever could. The court didn't need a speech. The paper did it for them. Later that evening, I gathered all the old portraits, anniversaries, family reunions, the kind with scripted smiles and forced hand-holding. I boxed them up and drove them to the Charleston Historical Society's drop-off box. No name, no note. When the clerk asked if I wanted to keep any copies, I shook my head. I don't need pictures to prove what didn't protect me. Micah was in the backyard when I got home, placing the final touches on our blanket fort. He waved me over and pointed to a new photo frame we'd hung together. Just the two of us, sitting cross-legged in that fort, marshmallows in hand. The caption we chose, "Started over, stayed true." On my way to the mailbox, a neighbor trimming her hedges looked up and called out, "They say you were brave?" I smiled, then answered, "No, I was done." Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't fighting back. It's choosing not to return to where you were never truly welcomed. I used to believe that silence meant safety, that keeping the peace meant preserving family. But I've learned that peace built on erasure isn't peace at all. It's performance. And truth, raw, inconvenient truth, doesn't need permission to exist. If you've ever been made to feel small for standing up, or guilty for finally drawing the line, I hope this story reminds you that boundaries are not betrayal. They're survival. They're strength. I'm not here to tell you forgiveness is easy, or that letting go doesn't hurt. But I can say with clarity, after walking through all of it, sometimes, you don't mourn what you've outgrown. You breathe better. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your peace and preserving an illusion? What did you do? Drop a comment below. Type 1 if this story resonated with you, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with this story, that's okay too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in from. Every perspective matters. If this video moved you, challenged you, or made you think twice, hit subscribe to follow this channel for more real, human stories that aren't always clean but are always true. Until next time, stay grounded, stay bold, and never apologize for choosing your truth.